listening to the Art of Homeschooling podcast, where we help parents cultivate creativity and connection at home. I'm your host, Jean Miller, and here on this podcast, you'll find stories and inspiration to bring you the confidence you need to make homeschooling work for your family. Let's begin. Well, hey there. Let's talk today about gratitude, because gratitude is really the starting point, right? It's seriously the foundation for resiliency. It's that first step. If you start every day with gratitude, you'll build resiliency, that elasticity or ability to recover more quickly from difficulties. In this episode, I want to share with you my own thoughts and journey of practicing gratitude, as well as a few fun ideas that you can do as a homeschooling parent with your family. It's not always the first thing that comes to mind, right? Gratitude is not always the first thing. We are more likely to get hung up on questions like, are we doing enough? Or maybe even feeling like we can't do this, but we don't want to admit that to anyone, or feeling critical of ourselves or our children, our partners, even the curriculum. But I can honestly say from personal experience that practicing gratitude brings more gratitude. Here is a great quote from Melody Beatty. Gratitude turns what we have into enough. Gratitude turns what we have into enough. There's even science behind this, right? That shows how gratitude increases those feel-good chemicals in our brains, the chemicals that contribute to feelings of closeness, connection, and happiness. All of that comes with gratitude. So it's here, it's Thanksgiving week here in the United States when this episode comes out. And happy Thanksgiving to all of those of you who are celebrating. I know that for many, it's been a very different year, right? It's 2020, and we've all had to make adjustments, maybe even accept a few disappointments. But when we focus on what we're grateful for, those feelings grow. Here's another great quote for you. This one comes from Neil Donald Walsh, and he said, "The struggle ends when gratitude begins." The struggle ends when gratitude begins. How do you practice gratitude? I know for me, I used to brush off the idea, right, of having any kind of conscious practice around gratitude. I would think, well, of course I'm grateful for some things, right? But when I started actually writing down 3 things I'm grateful for each day, right before I drift off to sleep, I noticed that there were always some wonderful things from the day to make note of, right? Even when I thought the day was a bust, like even when I thought the whole day was a failure, I was often surprised to discover little things that had gone well, little things that I was deeply grateful for. My friend Jane calls these signs of wonder. And these little signs that we can make note of, they really help bring us hope, a sense of hope in a very deep way. Another practice I have is when I can't sleep. So when I'm lying awake at 3 a.m., instead of, my brain spinning on the lists of things that I didn't do or should do or whatever, I've started listing or thinking of all the things, naming, I guess, in my head, all of the things that I'm grateful for. And I just keep going until I fall back asleep, right? So instead of counting sheep, I don't even know if that's really a thing. Did anybody ever really count sheep? But instead of counting sheep, I'm counting all the things that I'm grateful for, everything I can think of. I find that even the next day, there are more things I notice, right? My gratitude grows. You know, what we focus on grows, you know that saying. So nowadays, I also write down what I'm grateful for first thing in the morning in my journal. There's a little section that just has 5, you know, a spot for 5 things that I'm grateful for. And it just starts my day off on the right foot. It tunes me in to gratitude. This can really help set the tone for the entire day. So here I have now a few ideas for you for activities that you can do with your kids, right? To focus on and practice gratitude. I want to share a few of those. So here's one. And we love picking one of these, right, during the week of Thanksgiving at our house. And these are things that you can do with multiple ages, like multiple generations. One year, actually, we did this for a number of years when the kids were in the elementary grades, I think. So we would cut out leaves, like leaf shapes from colored construction paper, and put the leaves in a basket with, you know, some pens and scissors and string. And then I'd go outside and find a branch that was the perfect branch to bring to make like a centerpiece in the dining room. So I'd put the branch in the middle of the dining room table and then leave the basket of leaves out. And everybody was invited to write something that they're grateful for on a leaf. So on each leaf, there would be one thing that someone wrote, you know, about what they were grateful for. And then at our Thanksgiving dinner, we would read all of the gratitude written on these leaves. Another idea is to collect some tangible item like acorns. We have a lot of oak trees here. So I would collect acorns, and you could collect anything, right? Small items from nature or those little gems you might have in your house, whatever you want to collect, and put them in a basket or a bowl. You know, we'd put it on our table or on the sideboard in the dining room, wherever you spend a lot of time. And next to it, put an empty glass jar. So when everybody sits down to the meal, or at some point, right, during the holidays, you could all sit in a circle together, and each person takes an item, an acorn, out of the basket, mentions something they're grateful for, and puts it into the jar. And that way you can see the gratitude grow, you know, as everybody mentions something, you can see the gratitude grow. And then you have this jar full of these items that represent everything that you're grateful for. It's like a visual, a collective visual of your gratitude. This can also be done by just writing what you're grateful for down on a card. So last year, actually, at a larger extended family gathering, we took index cards and pens. That's it, super simple, little pieces of paper and pens, and put them out. I think they were out Wednesday and Thursday of Thanksgiving weekend, and everybody was invited to write what they're grateful for on a card. So everybody wrote that down. We put them all in a basket, and then during our meal, we passed the basket around, and each person would take a card out and read it. Right? It was not necessarily their card. It generally wasn't. I think one person got their own card. But everybody would just read, you know, something that someone had written that they were grateful for. This can be fun to do too, where it's anonymous and then you try to guess who wrote it. But you can keep this one going through the holiday weekend if you want. We all really want to be like seen and heard and appreciated. And this is a way to do that, to really connect heart to heart. So I hope these ideas I've shared about practices, fun activities we've done in my family over the years, spark ideas for you, right? To come up with something simple and engaging for you to do during the holiday season. I just want to wrap up this episode with a wonderful quote from Rudolf Steiner. He's the founder of the Waldorf approach to education. And just keep in mind, he wrote this probably 100 years ago, right? And here's the short version of the quote, and then I'll read you the longer passage. He said, "One can develop love in the best possible way through gratitude. One can develop love in the best possible way through gratitude." Okay, here's the longer passage. "Nowadays, the feeling of gratitude is underestimated. Gratitude connects people with the world. It makes them feel part of the world. If one guides the child in such a way that it can develop gratitude, or even the most for even the most unimportant or trivial things it meets in life, then that child does not close itself off from the world in egotism. Then it becomes altruistic. It feels itself to be a part of the environment. And when one has imparted to the child the feeling of gratitude, then one will realize that the basis for moral education has been planted. Because if one has taken care of this feeling of gratitude, and gratitude is experienced as compatible with all knowledge, then the feelings of the child will easily be penetrated by the love that the human being must have for the rest of humanity and ultimately for all creatures of the world. One can develop love in the best possible way through gratitude." Oh, so wonderful to think about how we experience gratitude, like really take it in and experience it in a deep way. So I'm keeping this episode a little short because it's a holiday week, like I said, here in the United States. But let me just say thank you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for listening to this podcast. And if you're feeling grateful for the Art of Homeschooling podcast, here's what I would love for you to do right now. If you would just take a few minutes to go to Apple Podcasts or iTunes or Podcast Addict to rate and review this podcast, I would really, really appreciate it. So thanks. And I have a little special gift for you to show you my gratitude. I have these sweet inspiration cards with quotes and tips from this episode. And you can find them in the show notes over on my website. So go to artofhomeschooling.com/episode 7, and you can get your own inspiration cards. Remember this, practicing gratitude in conscious ways really can help it to grow. So find a practice that works for you to bookend your days with gratitude, because gratitude elevates any activity into an act of prayer, and it leads to a sense of well-being. I'm so grateful for you and the important work that you're doing in the world by homeschooling your kids. Thank you. That's all for today, my friend. But here's what I want you to remember. Rather than perfection, let's focus on connection. Thanks so much for listening, and I'll see you on the next episode of the Art of Homeschooling podcast.